Hi everyone, Kim Fielding here, and I am going to try something new. I've been using all sorts of technologies lately, so we'll see how this one goes. Today I'm going to read to you from Conned, which is my new book that releases on June 1st. Of course, what I'm really hoping is you're going to hear my reading, you'll be totally in love and can't wait to find out what happens next, and you'll run out and order it. A little bit about the book. It is book 6 in the Bureau series. However, if you are new to the Bureau series, you can start with this one if you want to. This book actually takes place earlier than the first 5 books. It takes place in 1928, and it involves a different couple than the other 5 books. Actually, any of the books you can read in pretty much any order you want to, but you can certainly start with this one. This book is also the longest book in the series so far. It's about 67,000 words. And it is the noiriest book. They're all kind of noir, but this one is extra noir. I was reading and watching Maltese Falcon right before I wrote it, so that was part of the influence. A little bit else, if you do want to read the other Bureau books, either before or after you read this one, you can. All 5 of them are available individually, or if you want to, I've collected them into 2 volumes, so Volume 1 and Volume 2. Volume 1 is available in ebook and print and in audio with a fantastic version by Joel Leslie, and he is just finishing up right now, finishing the audio of Volume 2. So if you're an audio person, you're in luck, and you're in even more luck because if you're an audio person, he will be recording Conned in September, so eventually you'll have that available, but in the meantime, you'll be able to read it. It will be available, like I said, on June 1st in ebook and in print versions. You'll be able to get it on Amazon, Smashwords, and pretty much any place where books are sold. You can pre-order it now, which would be fantastic, make me happy. I'm going to share with you the cover. Since I don't actually have the print version yet, I'm going to show you this backwards. Beautiful cover by Reese Dante, and it gives you a little bit of a feeling for what the book is about. And I'm going to read to you just right from the very beginning. I was going to, it's noir. I was going to dress up in a costume and wear like a fedora and a trench coat, but it is 100 degrees almost right now here because I live in the 5th circle of hell, and my husband and I have a fundamental disagreement about when one can turn on the air conditioner, so I'm not wearing a trench coat or a fedora. So you'll just have to do without the costume. Also, one of the main characters who you'll be hearing in this, which is from the very beginning of the book, his name is Thomas Dunn. He's English. I'm not going to try and do an English accent, so I'm sure that when Joel records it, he will do a lovely English accent. I would just murder it, and it would be painful. So we'll do it in my nice American accent. San Francisco, November 1928. The cold, damp air wafted in, smelling of rotting fish, but Thomas Dunn didn't close the window. His back to the murky glass, he laid a cigarette paper on his desk and sifted tobacco onto it. His fingers shook slightly, causing some of the flakes to go astray, but he ignored those, rolling and licking and pinching the cigarette into shape. The lighter flame flickered. Thomas inhaled, closed his eyes on the exhale, and leaned back in his chair to stare at the high ceiling. 1 more month's rent on the office, he calculated. 2 weeks more than that if he gave up his flat and moved in here. The loo down the hall would suffice for washing up, but he'd have to sleep on the floor. He'd slept on worse. He heard the footsteps first, weighty and confident, so the heavy knock didn't surprise him. Out of caution, or maybe just habit, he kept one hand on his desk, very near the center drawer. Come in. The man who strode through the outer door and into Thomas's inner sanctum was too big for his expensive gray suit, the waistcoat button straining and his neck overflowing the collar. Mid-50s, rings on his sausage-like fingers, a florid drinker's face, and when he removed his fedora, thinning hair the color of old wool. He smelled of whiskey. Thomas Dunn? He demanded, as if someone else might be sitting in Thomas's office at Thomas's desk. Yes, and you are? Where's your girl? Pages are zipping up. Thomas lifted his chin. My girl? Secretary. I gave her the year off. Thomas allowed his mouth to stretch into a feral smile. The man's eyes narrowed. You're English. I was English. Now I'm American. Huh. the man grunted. Herbert Townsend. He didn't put out his hand for a shake, but instead hung up his hat and overcoat before settling with a loud sigh into the chair across from Thomas. Something about this man didn't feel quite right, and Thomas wanted to send him away. Wanted, in fact, to retrieve the gin stashed in the desk and drink until he'd forgotten about everything except the taste of juniper berries. But 1 month, plus 2 more weeks if he slept on the floor. How may I help you, Mr. Townsend? How long have you been in the States? Is that pertinent to our business? Yeah. Thomas shrugged as if it didn't matter. I arrived in Boston in 1923. I moved to San Francisco this February. 5 years. Townsend scrunched up his face thoughtfully. Were you a copper back in jolly old? Instead of answering right away, Thomas rubbed out his cigarette in an overflowing ashtray. He would have liked to roll another, but was afraid his fingers would be unsteady, and he didn't want this man to see it. I was a member of the Metropolitan Police Force. It was hard to tell from Townsend's expression what he thought of that, but he didn't get out of the chair and walk away. He wore a diamond on his tie, bigger than the ones on his rings. A gold watch gleamed at his wrist. It's a strange thing for a man to do, Townsend said at last. Leave a position in his own country to travel here and become a private dick? He waited a moment as if expecting a response, and when he didn't get one, he pulled out a silver cigarette case, chose a cigarette, and lit it with a gold lighter. He didn't offer a smoke to Thomas, who shoved the ashtray closer to him, spilling the newest butt onto the desk's scarred surface. If Thomas listened closely, he could hear the foghorn calling from Alcatraz. Some people said it was a mournful sound, but he liked it. It was a badly needed reminder that sometimes someone might care whether others lived or died. On occasion, he was tempted to call back to it, but not today. Townsend smoked a cigarette down to a stub, eyeing Thomas the entire time, and then pressed the stub into the ashes. I need to find a boy. A boy? A young man. He's disappeared, and I'm worried about him. Disappeared could mean a great many things. Thomas hoped he looked sympathetic, but that wasn't a familiar expression for him. Have you contacted the local police? Townsend barked a laugh. You haven't learned much about your new hometown yet, have you? Not too promising for a snooper. Maybe that's why you can't afford a girl. Thomas knew better than to let this man get under his skin with his expensive suit and his diamonds and a demeanor that said he was used to getting his way. Still, Thomas couldn't help but shift angrily in his chair. I'm a quick study, was all he said. Sure, Townsend said dismissively. I'm not contacting local police because I am the local police, or near enough. I was assistant chief of police. Was? Thomas had had mixed experiences with the SFPD. A lot of them were good blokes during their best. Others were little more than thugs on the take and eager for violence. He didn't know which camp Townsend had belonged to. I've retired in order to pursue other career opportunities. Next year, I'll be running for mayor. And the boy? Prompted Thomas, who already had a hunch where this was going. An acquaintance. One of those youths who've taken steps down the wrong path. I've been trying to guide him toward more righteous living, but I'd prefer not to let word of that get out. I like to engage in these small civic projects outside of public notice. Sure. And Thomas would go home to discover his one-room flat had transformed into a castle. But it was neither his place nor his desire to judge another man's proclivities. Besides, Townsend's wallet was undoubtedly considerably fatter than Thomas's own. And now you can't find this boy? Thomas asked. No. He hasn't been seen at his usual lodging for several days. As I said, I'm concerned. And you want me to find him? Discreetly, yes. Townsend reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a bill which he placed on the desk. $100, crisp and new. This is an advance for expenses. Bring me his current address within a week, and I'll have 2 more of these for you. $300 would be enough to keep the wolves at bay for another 3 months, maybe 4 if Thomas skipped a few meals. And he wouldn't have to sleep on the office floor. That's all you want, to know where he's staying? Yes. $300 is a lot to pay for an address. Ah, but I'm paying for more than that, aren't I? I'm paying for silence as well. Townsend's eyes lit with a strange intensity, and he leaned forward, his body seeming to increase in size until he hulked like the statue of a mad god. Today, I'm eyeing the mayor's office, but that's not the end of it. Not by a long shot. I'll be governor next, and after that, well, after that, the White House. You seem pretty certain of the long shot. Thomas kept his voice steady, but moved his hand closer to the center drawer. But it's not a long shot at all. I have certain methods at my disposal. A little magic, let's say. Townsend's wink was terrifying. Magic that might fail if certain rumors about you began. Townsend leaned back with a satisfied smile. You show signs of intelligence. Good. Yes, I'd prefer to keep certain matters out of the public eye. And Mr. Dunn, as my star rises, I'll be needing a certain type of man around me. The type who can do his work and keep his trap shut. If you prove to be such a man, well, we might find ourselves in a long and lucrative relationship. He moved his hand slightly, perhaps deliberately making the diamonds flash in the light. Thomas eyed the money as if he were considering the offer carefully, as if there was any chance he'd send this man away. Nodding almost imperceptibly, he took the bill, folded it in half, and put it in his pocket, fancying he could feel the weight of its promises. A comfortable bed, a hot shower, a cup of good tea instead of the coffee-like swill they served at Bianchi's. These images were fortifying enough that Thomas trusted his hands to remain steady. He rolled another cigarette and lit it, feeling the drag sharp in his lungs as he inhaled. What can you tell me about this boy? He pulled a small notebook and pen from a side drawer, opened the notebook, and prepared to write. With an expression of smug satisfaction, Townsend settled more deeply into the chair, making it creak in protest. He calls himself Roy Gage. He was staying at the Embarcadero YMCA, but he's moved out. Embarcadero. Townsend's lips quirked into a smirk. Yes, of course. You know the area, I presume? It was a pointed question. Even if Dunn had lived in the city only a few months, Townsend must have known that he'd be familiar with the zone near the ports. It was only a moderate walk downhill from his office. But Townsend clearly meant something more by it. The stretch from the Embarcadero up Lower Market was where men exchanged knowing looks, where speakeasies admitted everyone, even women in suits or men in dresses, where a boy like Roy Gage could temporarily be employed for $1 or $2. Describe him, Thomas said. I can do better than that. Townsend reached into his breast pocket again, and for a fraction of a second, Thomas was certain he'd pull out a revolver, even as Thomas's hand remained on the desk, twitching uselessly. It was fortunate that Townsend simply produced a photograph. He set it on the desk, oriented so Thomas could see it properly. 2 men stood in front of the arched arcade of the ferry building. Perhaps unaware of the camera, they stared into the distance as if waiting for a streetcar. The younger one, Roy Gage, Thomas presumed, looked to be about 19 or 20 with a sullen expression. His flat cap sat at a rakish angle, and his jacket was too big for his lanky frame. It looked as if he'd borrowed someone else's clothes. Who's the other fellow? Thomas asked. His name's Abe France. He employs Roy on occasion. Thomas's eyebrows rose. Employs? Mr. France is a spiritualist and magician. He requires an assistant at times. Picking up the photo, Thomas took a closer look. It was hard to judge France's age, although he was clearly older than Gage. He was shorter, too, and carried a bit of muscle on his frame. He wore a Homburg and a dark suit that had been carefully tailored to fit. Whereas Gage was pretty, France was handsome, with a strong nose, generous mouth, and square chin. His eyebrows had a natural arch that suggested amusement, but sadness pulled at the corners of his eyes. Anything else? Thomas asked, setting the photo down. I don't want you to talk to him. Might scare him away. Just find out where he's staying. Right. After staring at Thomas for several moments, Townsend grunted and heaved himself to his feet. He flung a business card onto the desk. "Call me at this number when you find him." He retrieved his coat and hat, shot Thomas a final grin, and clomped through the outer office, slamming the door as he left. And that's the first chapter, and hopefully you're hooked, and now you're going to have to find out a little bit more about what happened to Roy Gage and who's this mysterious magician guy, who is, of course, a very handsome fellow here on the cover. So I hope you, again, are intrigued. You run out and get it. I would love any of your comments, and I hope to see you all enjoying Kant really soon. Thanks for joining me. Bye-bye.